200th webinar, and that is how to be world-class at customer service, which is a topic that is obviously proven to be very popular. It's got one of our highest bookings of the year, and despite the warm weather, which we're always fighting against a walk in the park or an ice cream on days like today, we've got a good attendance dialed in already. And I've got 5 excellent speakers who are all going to be sharing different views on world class, what it looks like, and whether we need to be world class, and what does it take to be world class. So delighted to welcome Peter Massey from Bird.
Afternoon, John T.
You've been on a large number of our webinars, and you're probably best known for a couple of your catchphrases in terms of the best service is no service is one that was played back to me
endlessly
fairly recently.
We'll no doubt touch on that later on.
Yeah, and one of my favourite articles from Peter is the what you call the irritant grid, which I think is just value irritant grid.
My slides,
which we'll be carrying on later, which I think is
one of my favourites. Borrow with pride. That's the thing.
Delighted to welcome Jo Hale to her first webinar with us from Domestic and General. Jo was very kind to invite me to the relaunch of the Domestic and General Contact Centre in Nottingham, and I've got to say I was very, very impressed with what I saw there. There's an article on the website, and Jo, you're going to be sharing some of the real life experiences of trying to build a world-class centre.
Yeah, and I think just some practical things to remember and things that I've learned through my scars and dyed hair colour.
Excellent. And we've also got delighted to bring along Martin Hill-Wilson from Brain Food Consulting. And Martin, you've got a different perspective on world class and what it takes to do that. And what I always like about your slides, Martin, is that I never see the same presentation 2 times over. In fact, I very seldom even see the same slide twice.
That's right. It's my standard. It's always new material. So there's some new stuff today. Of course, it has to be because it's a special edition. So.
Excellent. And also a regular favourite, Mike Murphy from Genesis. Mike and I have probably been a double act on more webinars than most.
Indeed, yes.
And you're going to be sharing the way that technology can help in terms of the world-class approach.
Yeah, I've got a few slides really that just outline for me something which has moved, if you like, the technology problems and very tightly wrapped them up in a very consumable way. And I think modern applications really lend themselves to help customers use world-class performance. And I think older type technologies really get in the way and provide a fence. So from that perspective, I think the actual technology could be part of the problem to achieve world-class.
Excellent. It's quite interesting when we asked the audience question that we're asking in the chat room today, what was the last innovation that you deployed in your customer service? That's a question that we're asking in the chat room. And if you want to get to our chat room, it's callcenterhelper.com/chat. And there's an added advantage of being in the chat room is that you can download the webinar slides when you're in there. There's a little link here on the right-hand side of the screen. There's one other advantage of being in the chat room very well, which is that we have got a number of prizes. We normally have 1 prize for the best tip, but we actually now have 5 prizes for the best tip. That's either a box of chocolates or a bottle of champagne. And every panelist has got a spot prize they can award sometime during the webinar.
I'm tempted to award mine now, actually, for the question here, which is, what's the webinar about?
Yes.
So, if you've missed that, it's how to be world class at customer service. Yeah. So,
well, if that person's still there at the end asking questions, you get my spot prize.
Very good. And if you want to play back the webinar with your management team, that is on the link Call Center Helper recorded webinars that will be available later on today. So the question, if you go into our chat room, is what was the last innovation you deployed in customer service? While waiting for you to type that in, we're going to run a poll. And if we're looking at world class, we want to say what level of service do you want your customer service to be? Do you want it to be world-class? Do you want it to be consistently good? Do you just want to be better than your competitors? Do you want it to be good enough, or are you happy with average? So bearing in mind this is a webinar on how to be world-class at customer service, Peter, would you have a guess about what the most likely answer is going to be?
I would say that there's a bit of a bell curve there, but the consistently good end of the bell curve is probably where it'll head up. But yeah, it's a good challenging suggestion.
Okay, well let's have a look. I think we've got most of the votes in through here. I'm just going to close the poll and we'll share the results. The sample size here is 107. So 72% of the audience want to be world class, and 25% are consistently good. So I think that's quite interesting, Joe. That's encouraging.
Yeah, I think consistency is something customers want, isn't it? They don't always want to be wow. They want to be treated well, and the outcome to be clean and quick.
Well, we're now going to do the acid test, and I'm going to ask the question, so where are you today? So where is your customer service? In fact, we've got a problem, it looks like, on the poll here. We've got a bit of a gremlin that's crept into that. We're going to come back to that in a short while. Hopefully we can get a different poll question up there, and I'm going to just go back and take the last innovation that you deployed in your customer service. So let's have a look at what people have typed in. So we have had a range of options. We've had speech analytics, 2 people, digital signage, messenger have all been innovations that have come through.
I like Claire Seven's innovation. Our last innovation, customer experience. We ask our contact centre staff to send handwritten thank you notes, cards to customers who made their day.
Yeah, I think that's a really
brilliant.
That's a really good innovation, a very simple one to do. Paulus has said since everyone is using smartphones, we have Telegraph instant messaging group for customer service, where everyone can join and share their experiences. So that's quite a nice area.
That would be tough if you're running your centre out of Moscow right now. Well, the Russian government is officially banning Telegraph.
Okay, so that's challenging. Though I think there's other applications within the contact centre. I think
there's quite a lot of group
chat
situations
is
where,
one from,
but also externally with customers solving problems for other customers. Obviously, GiftGaff is the classic case study for that, but actually by involving people in what's needed to be fixed, you can get the answers straight away without having to wait for services.
Indeed. Well, we have the gremlins clipped in there, and so the poll we're going to ask is, how do you rate your customer service today? Would you say it is world class? Would you say it's consistently good? Would you say it's better than your competitors? Would you say it's good enough, or would you say it's average? Martin, where do you think this is going to be scoring compared to the 75%?
We didn't believe the last result, did we? I actually believed it because I think it's a self-selecting group. They've turned up to listen about world class, so presumably they're not going to fall at first bets and downgrade themselves. I still think world class will be at least 60% garner of the vote.
Of how they rate it today?
Yes. How you rate it today? Well, it depends, really.
I suppose if you are world class, you want to stay world class,
Well,
and you know that it keeps changing.
Indeed.
So
But
could be.
I think most people will probably go pragmatically better than our competitors, and I think that's probably a sensible way of looking at it. And I was right.
Yes. Average.
So 24% average, 26 better than competitors, 26 consistently good, 13% world class. So I think I mean, maybe this is self-selecting, that people who want to be world class are probably not there today, or a certain number would view that. And I know, Peter, you're going to be talking in just a minute at
It might be challenging world class.
Challenging why we need to be world class. So Kirsty has said we've also launched live chat as a method of contact for our customers. So it looks like in terms of innovations, There's a range of different ones, but sort of connectivity, new channel seems to be one of the big ones that's going through. So probably a good time now to jump across to Peter. And I know you're going to be looking at world class and just looking at some of the history of world class. I think it's going to be quite fascinating to see that. So if you'd like to just pop your slides up on the screen there and share your thoughts on world class customer service.
Thanks for the intro. Yeah, world class is an interesting one because I think I've been around the industry quite a long time. You say I think of myself now as a historian rather than a futurologist, and quite often you can find the answers come back from before. So I searched on my machine for world class and found that we'd researched it in 93, 97. You know, every 5 years, people come around the loop and think, right, we want to be world class, what does it take? And as I'll show today, I think some of it is consistently the same over time. Some of it has changed a little bit. We'll cover some of that off. So let's have a look down here. Oh, that's interesting. Moving on.
Just click into it again.
Yeah, let's just go. Seems to have frozen up. There we go.
Okay.
So a little bit of intro very briefly. What we get up to in the Amazon's growth model and the best services, no services you mentioned is that one of the arguments here is about, for some kinds of business, not having to require service is actually a stronger proposition than being good at service and causing it to happen. So the best service, no service is very much Amazon's approach. And I'll talk a little bit about Amazon later on in terms of world class. Obviously, as a consultant, we've helped lots of businesses. You'll recognise loads of those logos. And our sustaining passion at work is very much the area of stopping dumb things happening to our customers and our people. The two are very much one and the same. This is one of the classics I love from an insurance company, where you get back from holiday, you find 12 letters, each of them a zero bill. And when you phone up and you talk to people, they say, yeah, it's like happening all the time. People become numb to that kind of problem. It's stuff that just shouldn't happen. And stopping that kind of thing happening is part of our passion. I'm a great believer also in what people's personal passions are and sharing those as well as their work passions, because the two need to interact. So this presentation, you'll see in the top right there, some of my interests. I managed to get the Irish rugby in there for Mike, which my wife should want.
Thank you very much.
We love very much. The dog's no problem there for Joe. The musical side, the kids, and also anything on four wheels. So I endurance car and also into old cars. So if for anybody out there who doesn't like old cars, the next 5 minutes might be a bit drab, but there we go. And a new personal passion, because being of a certain age, I'm now a grandfather, and this is Max putting together his first presentation on the Michelin Guide and where we should eat next. So well, Max may pop up as well. So I'm just going to cover off three things. What's world class? It's not particularly easy to do, and therefore what can you do today? So looking back in history, this is 1770 and something called the Mechanical Turk. And it was a piece of artificial intelligence, shall we say, that was run around the world beating all the chess masters. And it became the world champion chess player as an automated machine. But if you look carefully at the photograph there, you'll see the velvet cushion, which the world champion chess player had to sit in secretly and actually make the moves from under the table. So not everything is as it seems with world champions sometimes in that sort of way. The obvious one to pick, though, as a petrol head was Rolls-Royce, because in terms of world class, there's a lot of things that can be learned from Rolls-Royce. So here are Max's parents down at Goodwood having a look at their latest offering. And as an old friend taught me once, the very first time I went in an old car, he said, in an old car, you can drive up to anybody's front door and they'll love to see you. So we now very luckily have one of these lovely old cars, and we do test the theory. So we parked it up at the front of the Savoy so that we could leave it somewhere safely. And when some of our American friends were over, we were talking about this story and drove up literally to the front of Buckingham Palace there on the pedestrianised area, where the policeman made a nice space for us so we could take a photograph. So you can get into all sorts of scrapes. But the interesting thing about the Rolls-Royce story is how long it takes to become world class. So in fact, they started in 1904, and by 1908 they built Silver Ghost, which is one of the original ones there. And by 1911 they were already known as the best car in the world. So that's only 7 years. So it's quite interesting when you think of this stuff as being very old. But they've not only did they do it in 7 years, they've maintained that standard over those years with some blips, it's got to be said. So the learning from that is quite interesting about the team. So there's a salesman who's Charles Rolls, the engineer, Henry Royce, and the hyphen, which I'll come back to. There is a hyphen in Rolls-Royce, very important ingredient. And Charles Rolls was from Monmouth, I think your home territory. You've seen the picture on the top. And he was an innovator. He was into racing cars. Cars weren't good enough, so that's what his inspiration behind forming Rolls-Royce. But immediately he'd done that, he moved on to aircraft, and sadly was killed in 1910 in the very early days of aviation. And so wasn't around that long. Henry Royce, on the other hand, was through to the 30s. He was actually an electrical engineer, not an automotive engineer. And that was the reason that they became the best car in the world, is the electrics were the thing that generally failed on those cars, and he was able to solve all of those problems. So the technology was there, the sales technology. And the hyphen was a guy called Claude Johnson, who was actually the commercial engine behind what was going on. And he did all sorts of gimmicks like driving London to Edinburgh back with only changing a punctured tyre. Nothing would go wrong. Getting 12 people onto one of the cars on the hill at Crystal Palace and taking off in third gear. He was the publicity merchant behind getting the thing to work. And in fact, relating to Joe's history at RAC, he also was the guy behind forming the RAC back in the day. But Royce was the kind of the culture, the heart of the organisation. And this is one of his many sayings: whatever is rightly done, however humble, is noble. You still see that in the factory today. Actually what he meant by that was detail. And I think for me, this is one of the things about organizations that I look at now, is the detail that they put into the way they design things, be they experiences or products, is absolutely crucial to world class. And the experience and the attention to detail is absolutely central. And that applies also to thinking about service expectations, what goes with a brand and the way that the service expectation is set. So here's a little quote from out of the front of the handbook, and I'll just let you read it for a second. It's quite interesting.
Do you want to read that out loud in case people...
Yeah, okay. Our interest in the Rolls-Royce cars does not end at the moment when the owner pays for and takes delivery of the car. Our interest in the car never wanes. So, and it goes on about this kind of thing. So, and it talks about some of the staff who come out to your residence. These calls can be made at the owner's residence, not only in Great Britain, but also in certain countries abroad. So, So actually the level of expectation about service was phenomenal. But really what they're looking at here is root cause. Because actually, why would they go out? It was because the chauffeur maintained the car, and if the chauffeur was not doing the right maintenance, the car would not be the most reliable car in the world. So these are all parts of service as they are today in the same way. And of course, you know, as long as your car works, then that leads to world-class experiences. So this is some trouble we got into quite a few years ago now with the Queen Mum's birthday parade, dragging along, I think it's the head of the RUC and the Maltese ambassador, having great fun. But the policeman behind me did point out that the wheel was about to fall off the car. So you can imagine, about a mile later, after this is all finished, we did pull into a garage and had to have the wheel changed. Anyway, so a world-class experience requires a world-class team. The point of the Rolls-Royce story is that world-class team. It's the technology, surely, it's the attention to detail, but a world-class team with a passion is absolutely vital. And so my challenge, first of all, about whether you want to be world-class is, are you passionate enough? Can you sustain that passion? You know, with the rate at which CEOs change territory, that sometimes is quite hard. And can you afford it? It's not so much can you afford a Rolls-Royce, although I know, Joe, your husband's got a garage with a Rolls-Royce in at the moment, I think, isn't it?
It has, selling it.
You can actually buy them for about £5,000–7,000. They're not as expensive as you think. But does your economic model afford you to provide that level of service you would expect from a Rolls-Royce? And most people's economic models don't afford world-class customer experience. They afford something else, and that's a challenge. So let's take a look at that. It's not actually easy to do world-class service. So here's somebody trying to work out what makes world-class service work. And if you work down the maths in there, you can see his family sort of hung himself off the square root of nothing, because it's, you know, you can spend a lot of time trying to get to world-class and struggling through. Back in the late 90s, we had some lovely clients that we were working with who wanted to know about this challenge of world-class. And we said, right, so where in the world can we go? At the time, it was deemed that world-class service would be in America. We'd go and have a look at some of the companies over there. And so we took ourselves off on a trip around 4 centres in America and came back actually really disappointed. And part of the reason we're disappointed, I hope nobody's been drinking last night, because the spots should be moving in front of your eyes on the screen. But is that the reason we're disappointed, there's just so many moving parts and so many silos to making world-class service work that it's difficult to do. And in particular what we see is this misalignment. You know, one department missing another department. So actually not matching up in the expectations of what we've got. So your digital guy can be all over one aspect of the service, whereas the contact center might not. And making these things join up was a fundamental of the issues. So this word alignment for me is very central to what's world-class or not world-class. Maybe that doesn't matter about being world-class, but if your brand has a certain standing, are you aligned to the brand values and the brand promises that you're making in terms of the service offering that you've got? So can you make all those moving components line up? It's a bit like these iron filings around a magnet. Can you get the alignment to work across the organization? And so with those clients, we developed this little bit of thinking around understanding the business model and the operating model and linking them together with the economics. Could you, what could you afford in terms of service? And taking that down a little bit more detail, the sales proposition, service proposition that you offer in the competitive space, back to your poll, do you need to be just better than a competitor, or is your proposition that you're going to be world class and that therefore you should be up at that level? And then you can start to think about aligning these different factors. And this goes off into a 200-page spreadsheet. You can do the nth detail of it, but sitting around with your business and saying, okay, what kind of contact center do we want? What kind of contact center are we trying to provide? Let's have that sensible debate about the level of money that really should fund this and what level we're aiming at. So, this is perhaps a good case of alignment where, Trotter's van perhaps fits its brand quite well, or more seriously, something like EasyJet, it says easy on the side. If it's not easy in terms of the online app, in terms of the experience at the airport, in terms of getting on the plane, etc., that's going to let it down. And I find EasyJet's absolutely fine. It does what it says on the tin. And that, for me, is really good service. And it's hard to do. It's hard enough to be consistent even at that level, let alone any higher level than that. So that's the alignment. So my suggestion is, if around your business, you're being asked to provide world-class customer service, maybe there's a better question, first of all, you need to go and have a discussion with the board about what do you want to afford? Why do you want it to be world-class? Does that fit in with our brand proposition? And putting that challenge there. Because today, being world-class today is really quite difficult, because world-class has moved on a long way. So I use this slide about the Google Brain team. This is really about the competition for talent, that actually attracting the very best people to your organization is a really vital part of why the best in the world are the best, going back to that Rolls-Royce team. And to the winner the spoils, because now there are some companies who are in that virtuous circle where they've not only got the people, they're creating the money, and they're able to do so many things. Like Google might go into Google Translate, or it might go into whatever. It's actually, in terms of advertising, it's taking most of the advertising dollars now around the world. It's very, very powerful in that way. So when you start to look, I'm sure there are more, but Amazon, Facebook, Google, Apple are the obvious four. How do you compete with these companies? And when I'm talking with my international colleagues, we often compare notes on who do we think are really, really good. But when we look at some of the statistics, if you look at Amazon as an e-tailer, retailer, and look at its contacts per unit shipped, compare it to any retailer, and they are orders of magnitude ahead of it. They're not just a little bit ahead, they are orders of magnitude ahead. If you look at Facebook and say, how many IT staff does it require to support a user? And again, orders of magnitude different, because they're supporting millions and millions of users per member of IT staff. So by any benchmark you look at in these organizations, they're a long way ahead. Apple sometimes a little bit on the edge, not sure, but it doesn't mean to say you can't compete. So two great examples here, which I use personally at home, Nest and Ring, are fabulously well done. For me, they do create world-class experiences, because the way they design the product in the box, the way they design the support for the engineer who fits it, or for the person who fits it, down to with Ring, there's a little spirit level in the pack, there's the right screwdriver, the right drill bit. They're thinking about how to make this really, really work. And it's no wonder Amazon have just paid $1 billion last week, to buy Ring. Nest went for 2.3 billion after 1 year. So it just shows you, if you go after world class, there's a level that can be reached, but you know, maybe you end up as a target for these companies, which is probably one of the ambitions. But that's the world we live in. You know, if you can't afford the robots, you're not going to compete with the logistics. If you don't get into the augmented reality that we're going to see from a lot of these companies, where will you be in what's going on? So back to the passions. You know, grandchild Max, who's now 4 months old. This is when he was 3 months old. Max's reality is going to be that world. It's going to be a different environment in which you compete. And Max, although he can't actually hold anything, already knows how to swipe out a phone. And by luck, he took his first selfie here, as would happen. But you know, the technology is not going to go away. We are going to see more and more of those advances coming through. And of course, we've got the challenges of this technology, the data protection, and everything that's going with it. We're looking at transnational companies. And even this morning, Facebook have announced that they're moving customers out of Ireland into their California jurisdiction because they don't want to fall under GDPR. This is the sort of transnational behavior that we're going to see and going to have to compete with. And obviously, some of the social and ethical discussions as well. I won't go off onto drone swarms and killer bees and things like that, but there's so much coming down the line. The issue is, do you see the glass as half full or half empty? Obviously, you've got to be optimistic about the way service and service experiences are going. It's so much better than it used to be. You have to remember the days when you used to have to ring, you know, a call center or an office or whatever, and it was slow and clunky and everything else that went with it. So we will have a lot of differences, but you know, there's a lot there. So what's my point? Today's world-class companies, they win with both people and customers. It's not one or the other. They're massively, I put profitable and crossed it out, valuable. You know, sometimes it's the share price. For quite a long time, these companies were not making money, but they could see where they were going because they sustained their passion for decades about what was really important to them. And that's what's really important, this passion. And I put a quick note in there for First Direct on the side, as you can see. You know, I think for me, they're one of the most sustained in the consistently good. They're world-class because they're consistently good. And doing that over years and years and years, you're world-class at something. And the Amazon speaker, they went from nowhere to the biggest seller of speakers in the world in a year. That's the danger of this virtuous circle. Okay, so just recap, world-class requires a world-class team with passion, sustaining the passion, and an economic model that works. That's really the takeaway slide. You know, have a play with that. If you want to have a look online, you'll see more stuff from us on there. And that's all, folks.
Okay, thank you very much indeed for that, Peter. I think there's some very good points overall in there. Certainly, can you afford to be world class? I think is a very, very valid argument. Does the cost model stack up? If you do want to be world class, then certainly alignment. You know, getting rid of those misalignments. Certainly, there's in most companies a big misalignment between departments, so you've got to get your service joined up. Passion and attention to detail is quite an important one. When we're recruiting members of staff, one of the big questions is attention to detail. Anyone who has a spelling or grammar mistake on their CV doesn't get any further, because if you know, we take the view, if you can't get that right, where you've got your career depends on it, you're not going to be doing that when you're under pressure. So we'll just have a quick look. We've had a couple of points before we jump onto Joe. Lee says the last innovation we had is a system where our supervisor team is alerted to external ticket updates to increase the likelihood that the likeliness that agents will update clients as soon as possible. I think that's quite a nice one. And we've had a tip in for Pravesh. And this is going to win the first bottle of champagne. This is my first spot prize. I'm going to get in early. Treat your staff the way you want to be treated. If your staff feel appreciated, this will be reflected in the type of service that you deliver. So really like that one. We've got a lot of agenda. We're going to come back to tips after Joe. So I'm just going to transfer. We'll get Joe's slides up on the screen. And Joe, would you like to go through your presentation?
Okay, so I'm going to carry on where Peter left off actually, and talk a lot about the team element of the service. So I'm going to sort of give you my experience over many years. I am only 21, but I've had a few more years of experience of steps to have success when you're creating that world-class environment. So I suppose the first, I've got 5 real steps for you. Defining your strategy, understand your journeys, capture your ideas, keep it simple, and communicate it. So I think one of the things I've learned over a very long time in service and in operations is that one of the clear things you have to do is be clear about why you're doing it. So if you think about defining that strategy, it's a bit like Peter's talked about, why are you doing this? Is it you want to be the Rolls Royce? Or actually, can you just be a Ford Fiesta in a good way? And be realistic about that. You know, quite often in an organisation, we make promises around having great technology, great experience. We actually don't have the money all of the time to do that. So be realistic about what you can get and get it sponsored as high as you can go. So if you're lucky like me and have a fabulous CEO who believes in service, then you have a fighting chance of getting that, and a board that does have a fighting chance of getting that service to where you need it to be. I also think it's important, what are you going to do? So think about it from what is it your customers want? What is it that your competitors are doing? What is it that's around you? Is the technology around you useful for your customers, and should you buy that technology because they'll use it, not just because everybody else is having it? And then also make sure you've got some real scope and benefits, and decide how you want to do that. So that attention to detail that you talked about is quite important, because you could go for the world, you could spin for the world, but actually likelihood is you won't like it. And secondly, your customers probably don't want it. So thinking about that strategy is quite important. The second piece is about your journey, so understanding your journey. So as you can see from my lovely picture there's an expectation and then the reality of what happens for a customer. You know, you think, and when I joined Domestic in General, I phoned up and listened to calls, and that, you know, the experience that our senior leadership team thought was happening is quite different to the reality of it. So a good thing for me is listen to calls, understand your journeys, create them, use the data you have around you to do it. I'm going to steal Peter's slide here, which is value irritant model that Peter used. I used that at RAC with him for a number of years, which is, you know, decide what you're going to do with each bit of those processes. And I think it's quite important to map the customer journey against actually your internal journey. So what the customer does compared to what you do either in your call centre or through the different channels, and make sure the hotspots you have in those channels, are they clear? Do you know where the journey goes wrong for the customer? Is it actually at the same point that it probably goes wrong for an agent? So how do you make that happen? And understand your moment of truth. Where's the bit you've really got to get right? I think moment of truth is a little bit corny as a word, but actually that's the bit where you can decide, I might just in the organisation decide that I'm going to make the point of that moment of truth the wow point. And the rest of it I'll just do normally, it will just be a simple process, but that area I'm going to focus on. And that actually might make you world class. Because if your competitors aren't making that wow point a really fantastic experience, you've got more chance of getting that right. So think about the way that you do it, think about the journeys you have, use the data you have around you. And then I think the next step of that is capture ideas. Your front line or the teams you work with usually have the answers. And if we ignore them at our peril, so spending time with them, understanding the experiences that customers have, but also the experiences that your agents have on a day-to-day basis. Making sure that you're running some workshops with them, understanding what's going on, what are they seeing, what are customers saying to them, and using that information to help them help you build an experience that you want for the future. Because ultimately your brand is either something online, or it can be the person they speak to. You know, domestic in general is the brand of domestic in general isn't me, it's the teams that speak to them every day. So it's really important that you involve them in that process and learning. And then the next piece is, I'm stealing this from Martin, which is just keep it simple. Try not to boil the ocean and do everything at once. Do things little bit, make it easy, simple, change it, test it, make sure it works. Make sure you've got feedback loops, so if it doesn't work, you've learned quickly, fail fast, all of those things. Do that and just keep concentrating on it. You know, you don't have to change every piece of every journey. You could change the bit that makes the biggest difference. And actually, that's quite an important part of it. Quite often we have huge programs to do these changes. And while in principle they work, some of the little things make the biggest difference. So, you know, things like getting your agents to recognise that you've given great service can make such a difference culturally as much as it does on the journey. So keep it simple, keep it focused, and iterate and learn. And then the final piece is fundamental for anything when you're working with people and teams is communication. Sharing what you're doing. If you're going to be world class, define what that world class is. Be clear about that. Make sure that you share that internally, externally, and celebrate each bit of that success as you go along, and show that passion for it. Because actually, getting to be world class service can take you a while. But that doesn't mean on an occasion where somebody phones up, they can't have that experience, and it builds. So celebrating it and being passionate about it, but also empowering your teams and involving them and making sure they have a voice and share those stories. And I think that leads you to what is your world-class service. It will be different for every organisation, and just be clear about yours and engage your teams across the business in doing that.
Wonderful, thank you very much indeed for that. Some great points there. Certainly things like attention to detail, the value irritant grid. In fact, while we've been doing that, I've got a copy of Peter's article from a few years ago on that, where effectively it's a simple grid, and if I can paraphrase it, probably better. You look at, is it an irritant or a value to the customer? That's on one axis here. Is it an irritant and a value to the customer? And depending on where it fits in there, you either simplify it, eliminate it, leverage it, or automate it. And there's an example there. So that's the URL if you want to follow on that. So a really useful article there. Some great points. Keep it simple. Change the bit that makes the biggest difference. It's certainly a really good place to start. Iterate and learn and communicate. So some great thoughts there. Well, let's have a look at top tips and questions from the audience. So we've got a top tip from Matthew. It's a novel one. We used a group of 11 to 13-year-olds to help us rewrite all our motor insurance policy booklets, so we could remove all the jargon that is used. 1 in 7 adults have a literacy age of 11. So this has really helped to open our eyes to how confusing our literature actually is. I find this very refreshing. Yeah. So how brilliant is that one?
Yeah. Actually, I'm going to give my advice.
Okay.
I'll tell you the reason for that. I have for a long time said that we should employ teachers for learning in businesses. And also for writing plain English and stuff like that, so it's completely on message as far as I'm concerned. I think it's a brilliant idea. It's been done, so that deserves a prize.
So excellent. Congratulations on that one. Soraya says we have highlighted the daily standout customer feedback comments and the name of the agent who provided that service around the contact centre on boards, plasmas, and communication pages. I think that's great, and that sounds very timely. Here's one from Patty, who says we have a daily operational huddle at the start of the day for our team leaders who look after the various departments, operations leaders, training team, only 1 or 2 people from each group, to share successes and opportunities that happened from the day before and what is in store for the day, knowing the communication channels which this has helped other people know what is happening across the business. Do you use huddles in your organisation,
we
Jo?
We do. Huddles are brilliant.
Do you do those every day, or is that once a week?
No, twice a week.
Twice a week.
Twice a week. But most of them they have a focus, so it's exactly like this. They'll celebrate great service. We also have what we call Magic, Magic Awards. So make a great impression on a customer. Magic.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the idea is that we have those awards every month.
Excellent.
And they're built from the huddles that happen during the day.
Oh, wonderful. Really nice. Mike says we've moved the everyday evaluations to our supervisors and team leads, freeing the quality team to focus on those with the most opportunity to improve, which is nice. Mike has also said we've instituted QA Tip of the Week, a weekly bulletin with random tips on call handling. That's a nice little technique. I think I heard of one where they had something called champagne moments, which was the sort of most sparkly comment of the month, won a bottle of champagne from quality listening. Oh, Mike, I think really wants to win a bottle of champagne here. We post daily CSAT dashboards on our internal communication boards and positive customer feedback with agents' pictures for all to say.
So pass Mike the champagne.
Looks like digital signage is widely used there. Rachel says, in terms of some of the last initiatives they've done, we use Microsoft Teams to collaborate with our different teams within our customer service department, enabling us to share ideas. I guess that's another sort of Telegraph style internal application. Kirsty says, I agree, it's really difficult to get all areas of the business to work together. We also have an internal messenger, so we can try and work quicker for customer before departments.
There's actually been a whole debate that's been going on in the chat room, focused very much around the overlord, who have been talking and suggesting a bunch of stuff with other people. But it does seem, and I haven't heard this before, that a lot of people are now using real-time communication to link the contact center with the rest of the teams. Yeah. This is way beyond the kind of kindergarten, board on the wall stuff. This is about trying to get issues in real time, tapped into other people and getting them resolved quickly. Yeah. And it's really good to hear that a lot of people are now using that kind of tech in that way to get alignment and collaboration going. So I think there's a whole bunch of people who should get a prize for that, but I think that's a really encouraging sign.
Excellent. And Peter, to your part, and also Joe as well, Mike says alignment could be the biggest single hurdle to world class. Convincing senior management becomes difficult when they get complacent with good scores and good KPIs.
I think the other thing to think about is not to think of those scores as average. So we've moved away from average and trying to use your extremes. So it's quite interesting. Everybody looks at this average score, but actually when you look at the two extremes, that's when you start to get some interest. So if you've got quite wide scores and you've got particular areas that score has got a big variance, then that's when I think
we're customers behind each score.
Exactly. And then you can start to get senior management involvement and say, yes, you can see this average, but actually look at the variance here. It's quite big. Wouldn't we want that to be better?
Yeah, when you're doing a variance analysis, that's where you start. And I think it'd be interesting to see what Mike's tip is, if you like, in answer to that alignment problem, what they do in their business. So, Mike, if you're still on there, my champagne's in my hand, ready. I'm looking for the tip. Yeah.
And I think it's certainly very difficult to be world class if the senior management team isn't already wanting to be there.
Yeah.
It's almost impossible, I'd say. Yeah. So one last question before we jump across to Martin. And Cisray says, how much of a role does technology play in achieving world-class customer service? Well, maybe that's the time to jump across. I think, Mike, you're also going to be talking on that later. Joe, you wanted to say something?
I was going to say it depends on your business as well.
Yeah, and I think also the customer expectations. So having played with Nest and Ring and things like that, is my expectation of what an app can do is phenomenally more advanced than it used to be. Because somebody over there has done that in that area. I now feel more frustrated with my airport apps and things like that. So the technology and the ability to use it, not necessarily what it is, but the ability to use it well is the really critical thing.
Yes, indeed. So it's sort of necessary but not sufficient, almost.
Yeah.
So Martin, I think this is a topic you were going to be addressing.
That's my thing. So I would like to start off by saying I have studied the title. And we have got that word world class in. And I have to confess that I always feel a bit queasy when I hear world class. I'm not a great believer in it, particularly when it's claimed. And so in response to this, I have gone, right, if you really mean it, let's really mean it. And I think for the audience, which is actually fairly global, most of us probably are aware of those talent shows that normally happen on a Saturday, all things around the world. And I would say that probably the standard in those is remarkably high, in the sense that people really, unlike me, really can sing. You know, they really can do all these things. But there's a big difference between those people and even the people that win those competitions, and then what you would then consider a world-class performer, who are often actually the judges in those things, interestingly. And so there is definitely a road less travelled to take you from being damn good at stuff to being at the very top of the tree. My original set of examples is football. If it's not your thing, I apologise, just go to whatever sport or performance thing you like. But the people at the very, very top are almost magical in their abilities. You know, they just make things work in a way that the rest of us can't do. They're almost transcending. And for me, that is world class. Otherwise, there's too many people in that category. So that being said, I'm setting that as the benchmark for this, with all the points that have been previously made by Joe and Peter about can you afford it and what's necessary. What I've done is to try to paint a picture not of climbing up the hill, but actually have gotten to the top, and then observing that behaviour, how does it all link together? So what are the characteristics of people that display world class? I'll leave it to you to decide whether or not you can afford to buy the ticket. Okay. So let's get into that. So the first thing I would say is what distinguishes a world-class customer service capability is that we're no longer struggling to do the basics. You know, we have got those mastered, and indeed that is a simplified version of your value irritation model, done in pink. But it basically says we have had a laser focus for however long it has taken us to get the basics right. I suppose that's the conversation of process versus journey, of sometimes getting it right to always getting it right, to not just listening, but to acting, doing, improving, and naming it. Yes? And you will find organizations where the conversation about customer effort is the thing we should focus upon, has given way to customers' delight. And there are a few brands in the world that can really afford to focus on delighting the customer because they have got the basics right. Okay? So one of the characteristics for me of being world-class is that the basics of delivering customer service is absolutely mastered, and you've got that handled. The other thing to be said is that most of us are wallowing at the moment in a very complicated thing called to multi-channel, to omnichannel, to add messaging, to add AI, to add whatever else to the mix. And in reality, most of us are weaning ourselves off phone and are doing chat if we're a legacy brand. If we're a new brand, we can say we started from ground zero, we don't do voice. But even so, that's still a complex market because you've got to link together social, you've got to link together other forms of text. Video is turning up, there's the same kind of complexity sitting there. And in many respects, the dilemma is one of, do I buy it because it's been sold and my competitors are doing it, or is it desirable from the customer's perspective? And then you run into the real problem that we're very much a cost-orientated operation within business. So every time we offer new choices, it costs us more. So the balance between understanding what customers want and our ability to deliver that choice is a critical thing. And the picture that I've got in front there says, again, it's a bit naive to say young people text and old people talk. It's much more to do with the fact that, in fact, we're all on a digital journey and we're at different stages. The picture at the very bottom is from China, showing a couple who are obviously over 21, I would suggest, but are using WeChat in their daily life. And in fact, in China, it's pretty difficult to exist these days without using WeChat. So it's no surprise that they're on mobile, it's no surprise they're actually on a messaging app. And here's a personal example from me. This is our WhatsApp family flavors, where all the family from my dad downwards, with 4 siblings of my generation and then the 10 grandchildren exist. And John Hill Wilson is 93. He celebrated that last weekend, in fact. And there is his digital Christmas card to us. So do not assume that old equals certain channels. So you've understood choice, you can afford that choice, you basically know when they are required from your customers. And then in terms of the getting over that whole business of channel choice, that becomes invisible, you're then focusing upon the customer experience. And again, the customer experience has got a whole number of dimensions to it. I suppose if any of us have got form in terms of years spent in this discussion, all of it has changed. I suppose speed is a key one. It's always been important. I mean, you couldn't actually stick around very long even in the voice queue before you get fed up in reality. But speed is certainly talked about these days as being a premium. And indeed, people who are hip to this will talk about reactive customer service as not being the thing any longer. It's all about preemptive. And indeed, the arrival of AI and what that's potentially going to do in terms of predicting outcomes for us is going to, again, accelerate that. But we are dealing with a world where it needs to be real time, at the very least. Relevance, again, this is as much a marketing conversation as a customer service. Please don't inundate me with stuff. And one of the big dilemmas on self-service is to provide knowledge, but also to make the search highly relevant. And indeed, I'd much prefer just to be given the answer than go searching at all. So relevance is very difficult. It's also very difficult to know that the resource that we've offered up to the customer through the routing process and the triage has got the right answer. So relevance in terms of putting the right resource in front of the customer, giving the context and intent, that's very difficult. That's driven by context. It's still appalling the number of times that many of us are asked over and over, either within a single journey or across time, the same basic information about us, which, by the way, has been magpied away into CRM, but is never used. Somebody was talking earlier on that the last innovation they had was skills-based routing. I would say that's an internal preoccupation. What about situation-based routing? In other words, use what you know about me to route. That's another point. But use context much more. Personalization is dead popular. That's the reason why Facebook is hanging on by a thread at the moment, justifying that actually we do want to have a personal experience, therefore we will trade our data for that. And again, it's interesting to know how we do that at scale, how we use the data we've already got, how we will use post-GDPR that data in an intelligent way. And then at the end of the day, there's been a huge discussion that's gone on with the ability to automate now and the bots revolution. Funnily enough, everyone got nostalgic very early on and said, "Where's the human gone?" And so this balance now between when is the human versus when is the convenience of it being now or preempted is sitting in there. I'm just kicking off some work at the moment on emotion management in contact centres. And I'm sure if we go Google on call centre helper, I think that as a topic is pretty constant, isn't it?
Yeah.
The conversation about empathy. Now, again, if those are the dynamics, if you want, of what quality means, that's a pretty awesome thing to get all of those consistently right. And by the way, that's before you slice and dice your customers into personas, because the mix will be slightly different there. So again, quality is consistent. And that word consistency is probably one of the most key challenges that everybody faces, which we can rise to it, but to do it day in, day out is the most difficult thing, your outliers thing.
Yeah.
And the fallacy of hiding behind averages. Yeah. Consistency really means everyone gets a good deal at the end of the day. So that's extremely difficult to do. Part and parcel of that is reinventing how quality works, whether or not it has been a internally and legislatively focused activity which survives a number of preordained tick boxes, or indeed you're thinking about quality in a much more customer-centric way, and therefore there's a much deeper alignment with CX and what you're thinking about there. And there's 5 little things that I've got on the screen here, the way in which you can look at it, and this is a particular capability that for me sits at the other end of a rainbow, which most people are trying to traverse at the moment. Most people are sitting in a tick box world trying to get the heck out of there. Far in the distance is the fact that we predicate quality upon customer journeys. We predicate it upon having the confidence in our advisors to listen in the moment and to respond to what matters, and the assessment afterwards is based upon having that authority and that confidence. It's a collaborative form of engagement in terms of learning as opposed to prescriptive. And the whole language that we still have about breaches, failures, and down marking you, which we still do in quality, is absolutely history, and it's a completely different thing. So this is really a conversation about culture, to be honest with you. It's a conversation in which you've got to have a learning culture as a foundation. It's a complete realignment of the team leader role into a coaching role. It has got confident people who have got high skills, who are on a personal development path as a result of that. And real-time situational empathy, if you want, that language, is all about how CX gets driven practically within a customer service context. So again, you've got an alignment between all of those things. It's dead interesting, by the way, to get your CX people and your quality people around a table and say, are we on the same page here? For a lot of people, again, that's a conversation still to be had. The other thing to be said is that why bother, again, is an interesting thing, and I'm not a fan of coaching by chocolate, which does happen a lot, and there's a lot of Pavlovian behaviour that goes on. Mainly because team leaders don't know what the hell is happening around the table. They just see people talking to a disembodied voice at the other end or tapping on the screen. And they know that their site manager, like Joe, is wandering around, God forbid, the CEO's maybe in there, so they've got to look useful. So they sort of offer things out to their team, but they've got no idea what the hell's going on. And of course, you know, one of the arithmetic challenges of QA is that you'll never scale to deal with everybody. You know, you'll only deal with a very small percentage on a monthly basis. So you have to augment that with the fact that individuals personally are committed to quality and personally committed to excellence and have a motivation. And that little psychological loop there, it makes perfectly good sense. The purpose of the business drives the fact that I feel aligned to that, I'm excited, it has meaning for me, that releases energy, I'll go the extra mile, people think I'm fab, I'll get recognition, all of that virtuous circle. And the reason I drew that up for as a particular workshop I did once was to say you should never have people in charge of people if, in their own words, they cannot understand that psychology. Yeah, and that's the old conversation about just because you're excellent at something doesn't mean you should be in charge of people. You're going to be a subject matter expert somewhere else where you're not dangerous. But you've got to understand that loop, because again, this whole business of employee engagement, driving customer engagement, is contained within that slide. So again, you've got to make sure that the motivation is intrinsic. If you're using gamification, you've got to get the right side of that. Otherwise, you're doing it for all the wrong reasons. And flowing out of that, by the way, unless you've got that going, you're never going to have this happening. You've got to a point where we're way beyond projects. Yes, one of the big problems with projects is that there's too many of them, and they all tend to end badly, and we're all addicted to the next one. One of the points that Peter has made about sustained excellence over decades is, of course, that innovation doesn't happen occasionally, it happens just by virtue of. And indeed, if you look at the great organisations, they allocate time according to what they do on a daily basis and what they do in terms of innovation. And so within the customer service environment, I think we'd all say, having been around this for a while, I think 2018 was one of the most exciting periods of time in terms of genuine change. All right? So it means that unless you've done stuff in the next 12 months, you're going to be behind where you were today, which wasn't true maybe 2 decades ago. So you've got to be innovating as a matter of practice. And again, that doesn't happen just by saying someone come up with a good idea, please. You know, whether it's a digital suggestion box or a physical one, it really doesn't matter. It's a mindset, it's an encouraging thing. And you've got to break that out into a whole business practice, really, at the end of the day. And again, great customer service, world-class customer service brands are those that innovate as part of business as usual. So they've got past the simple point, by the way, is, oh, I can't allow people off the phone, I can't allow them off the chat. They're meant to be doing that. You can have 12.5 minutes to do your orientation huddle at the beginning of the day, but we couldn't possibly use people to innovate. And we haven't got any overhead, so therefore we don't innovate. So we're way beyond that conversation, at this particular point in time. And part of the reason that we can afford to do this great stuff is that we're no longer suffering the fashionista problem of this year's flavour. You know, whether it was customer experience, digital transformation, AI is currently in the headlines. The trouble is that CFOs have a limited period of time where they'll sign the business case off, and if nothing comes back after a period of time, they're going to go, right, you're out. What's the new thing I'm going to waste my money on? And of course, what you've got to be doing, particularly with CX, is to make sure that an NPS score, a customer effort score, a customer sat score, an outcome that we're doing for customers means something. Not just in terms of those scores, but in terms of commercial outcomes. So does it impact advocacy? Does it impact the fact that customers buy more from us? Do they stay longer with us? How does that manifest, and how are those two things connected? Because it is certainly true, just because Apple has an NPS of X, does that mean that we should? Absolutely not. That's the most stupid form of limitation you can go for. And it may well be that your breakthrough level of NPS to cause that kind of commercial behavior is much lower, might even be much higher, God forbid. But you've got to understand those two things. And what I have noticed is that whilst there's a ton of data proving that good CX delivers good commercial benefits, it is still not natural for boards to believe that equation. And my view is that each brand has to form that formula with the bean counters and go through that process of saying, we've looked at our data, we've looked at our purchase ledger, we've looked at our NPS ledgers, to put it very simply, and the two connect in this way or they don't.
And it's non-linear.
Yeah. But whatever that formula is, we believe in it, and therefore we build, we invest in it. So my point here is that the whole of this world class is underpinned with a commercial insight and belief at the C level that this is worth the crack. And that's the foundation thing. Okay, so let's dip down now into the way it looks and feels. I think the first thing to be said is that we try, I suppose, in value irritation model, to be ahead of the curve as much as possible. So if the best form of service is no service, the one slightly before that is anticipating it. That's good. Reacting is kind of okay. Being in court and complaints is really just not where it's at. Okay, so being forward-looking, and again, if you have got to know me because you know everything about me, and a lot of digital natives know that and they're comfortable, their quid pro quo on that is to say, so do you know what I want now, and can you deliver it right now? And so this is getting over the fact that FAQs, and this is an interesting one in your line of business, I have got that washing machine. I have actually downloaded that blooming, PDF on how to make it work, but it's on page 69. Can you not just anticipate that for me in some kind of a way and understand that particular point? So I only want it when I want it, and that's a heck of a thing to make that work. So you've got to be forward-looking as much as possible. People like Amazon do that brilliantly. They actually had a patent that they launched in 2012. They haven't enacted it, whereby the sum total of my insight, based upon what I bought, what I hovered over, what I put into my wish list, means I know what you're going to buy from me next. To the extent I will forward ship that to a local distribution point. Yes? That's a good stuff. That was in 2012 that they put that in. Yeah, so exactly. No, and sometimes in life things do go wrong, and I suppose just to segue into the discussion that we saw in the chat room earlier on, this is where things like Slack, any real-time messaging platform absolutely works. We recover quickly when things go wrong, and the thing I chose here is one that I still see is failure more often than not. When airports don't work and airlines don't work, what really happens more often than not, unfortunately, is the silence. And you'd have thought that they've got a history of this, they'd learn. But actually, most people freeze in the headlights. And there's this very, very poor process that goes on between corporate comms and deciding what the right things to say. And a bunch of customers that you should have said it ages ago, if not now, and keep me up to speed. So this is just a beautiful example, if you can be bothered to read it, which basically said my luggage got lost, but the airline in question recognized it, got to grips with it very quickly, communicated proactively, and actually got them back to me very, very fast. As a result of which I didn't have to do anything. That was amazing customer service. So again, things do go wrong, but rapid recovery when things go wrong is, again, the quality of a world-class brand. Again, back to this business about choice. We are living in a very eclectic world in terms of modality. We can communicate by voice, by text, by video. I mean, I just read a hilarious article this morning from my generation perspective, where people were celebrating the advent of voice. They're really just talking about Alexa turning up in retail. Okay, voice is the next big thing. Okay, real? Tell me about it. Tell me about it. It was voice from Alexa in a hotel room. Excuse me. So instead of picking up the phone to talk to reception, Alexa now did it. And you know what I'm going to say? Anyway, so you've got all of that choice. You can either do it live, you can do it self-service or proactive. And again, you've got a terrific variety of ways in which you can communicate. Do you need all of that stuff? No, you don't, but do you know which ones you do need? And indeed, look at the ways in which customers can make contact with us, you know, from the traditional desktop. And by the way, the UK right now, Ofcom, has got a complete balance between mobile communication and between desktop. We're at that balancing point as we speak in the UK, and that's from the age of 16 onwards. It is different by generation. But we're beginning to talk about speakers. We've got the Internet of Things, everything being connected. You know, we're beginning to move away from a keyboard to a disembodied gesture or voice ways of interacting. There's a huge amount of change that's going forward. How do you cater for that and keep up to speed? And part of the answer to that, by the way, is you cannot have omnichannel unless you have unified desktop. Absolutely critically important. If you don't have that, you have multi-channel, which is a mayhem, right? You have absolute nonsense. So just as a key point here, the two have to dovetail together because it tells the advisor what they need to know about the customer, what we're trying to do in terms of the journey, and also how they want to engage with us, and brings and orchestrates that together for the right outcome at the end of the day. You cannot be flipping between, what, 10, 12, 15 screens and have your attention on the customer. It doesn't work at the end of the day. So those two things are hand in glove. And flowing from that, coming back to this theme I made earlier on about continuity, with choice comes complexity. And sometimes we are in situations where I cannot actually finish off as a bank the communication you wanted to start with me on Twitter. Yes, if you look at most banks at the moment, they will still advise you to go to an 0800 number. Now, I can't begin to tell you how crap that experience is. A, because I probably started there. B, because I've lost context and you're getting me to go back to the beginning of the journey. So what is a better way of doing this? In our world that's growing, the balance between bots, virtual assistants, and humans is going to go backwards and forwards. Again, does context go here? I read this actually in The Drum, funny enough, which is a marketing magazine. And apparently social keywords has gone really successfully and caused a lot of inbound live voice, which totally surprised everybody, thinking it would be text, but it's actually gone down into inside sales teams. And what happens is they receive the call, they've got no context at all, what the ad was, why people are calling, etc., etc. So these are all small little instances where the continuity is instantly broken. And as people naturally move across these channels for different reasons, can you enable that? And the answer is yes, with the right approach from the infrastructure perspective. But what you're trying to take across time is intent and context. Okay, moving slightly forward then, what we're beginning to see now is the ability to more intelligently use people and also automated engagements, conversational engagement. And so how people discover, find support is going to become increasingly kind of a shared activity between people and virtual assistants. I don't think anybody is there yet. I would say this is emergent, even at world-class level, to be honest with you. However, there are people that have got a pretty good example of a virtual assistant which will escalate to a live person in context. I think that what remains to be done is that doesn't happen from marketing, sales through service on a life cycle basis yet. And nobody's really figured out how to start with humans and go to bots, and to start with bots and go to humans as a natural game of attack between those two. But again, if you think about it, that's definitely going to grow. And if you're into that business, again, options continue to proliferate. What you really don't want to be doing is building single siloed approaches for voice, for text, for particular types of platforms. You really ideally want to build once, have a common approach and deploy anywhere. And final point I'd like to make is that I think what is most characteristic of really, really excellent people in terms of being considered world class in any area of life is they are defined by never being satisfied. They are always looking for the next thing. They're always looking to reinvent themselves, and they're never content with the status quo. And again, if you think about a contact center, which very often is based upon a more compliant and regularized culture, it's quite a thing to have everybody discontented with how good they are and wanting to reinvent themselves and allowing that voice to come through in a way that everybody benefits from it. And next year, your customer service operation is definitely a reinvention of this year's. That's quite a tall thing. So that would be my criteria for what it takes to be world class.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for that, Martin. Some great food for thought. Customer effort has moved to customer delight. Quality is predated on customer journeys and not a tip box exercise, which means we need to go from team leaders roles being into a coaching role and moving it. Certainly, definitely, we need to move away from chocolate. And that doesn't mean me moving to sweets and other forms of sugar. Look at the actual emotions or feelings in the customer journey. The need to create seamless escalations, both across all departments and across all channels, is going to be very key. And be forward-looking and anticipate customer needs. I think some really great takeaways from that.
But I think there's no, rather like a footballer that can use left foot and right foot, world class, there's no area that's outstanding, you need to get on with it. In other words, everything is good. Peter's language, everything is aligned. That's distinguishing. So all areas have been cracked.
So one of the things we touched upon earlier was the need to be able to be available for people to get hold of you, and interesting part in being world class. Let's have a look at how many days is your contact, how many hours per day, for instance, take a weekday, maybe take today. How many hours today is your contact center open today? Is it open 24 hours a day? Is it open 12 hours or more? That's perhaps 8 till 8. Is it open, say, 9 till 7? Is it open 9 till 5? Or is it open less than 8 hours a day? So how many hours a day is your contact center open? Bearing in mind that the world is moving increasingly towards digital interactions and the expectation for always being available. Anyone like to take a guess at the most common answer?
I presume we mean by it's manned by people.
Manned by people, yeah.
So 24 hours support whizzing around the world is not as uncommon as we might think.
No.
It's not.
Well,
it's supposed to span the brand as a global brand, or whether it's a national brand.
And also what your service you're giving. So RAC, for example, 24 hours.
Yeah.
So
You can get away with that.
you can get away with that one.
well, let's have a look at the results.
Well,
So 21% are open 24 hours a day. There's a very large proportion there open 12 hours a day, which is very encouraging. 35%. 20% are open 10 hours a day. 20% are open 8 hours a day, and 4% open less than 8 hours a day. Quite interesting. I had a look yesterday at some what used to be world-class brands, and I had a look at what used to be considered a world-class airline. And if you lost a bag on this world-class airline and you weren't a member of their traveling club, their contact center was open, I think, from 1 o'clock till 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
Whoa,
and I was very, very surprised at that. If you are a member of their traveling club, you can get from 9 o'clock till 6 o'clock.
And that's how you get dissed on Twitter for that.
Yeah, indeed. So, so some food for thought about opening hours there, if you want to be world class. So let's have a look at some top tips and questions before we jump across to Mike. Rachel agreed with the comments that I think, Joe, you did. Defining a company strategy is absolutely key. Some tips. Erica said, we have a program here that employers will write a high five for other employees throughout the month, and then they will send a survey out. They send out a survey with the high fives without the employee's name, and whoever wins the most votes with them gets a trophy for the month, and also a day off or $100 and then there's a picture on the internet for recognition.
That's cool.
That's quite an interesting one. I think not knowing the name gives it added element of jeopardy in that one. Erica said, I always tell my agents that what's common sense to us is not to the customer. Try to always put yourself in the customer's shoes. If you didn't know, if you didn't work here, would you understand what was going on or what you just explained? I think this ties in very much for the element there. So we still have three tips to be awarded in the next 14 minutes. Tom says, innovation, make sure your staff are aligned to customer demand. If not, the teams that receive the highest contact volume will be burnt out and frustrated. Another example of alignment there, Peter. Claire says, anyone struggling to understand the what and why, watch Olympics from Chris Cook on swimming 2 lengths of the pool. It's a great way of helping you get to the truth or to your purpose. I don't know if anyone's seen that video, so we'll see if we can find a link and we'll pop that into the chat room. Or Claire, if you've got a link, that would be great to put into the chat room. Paula said, we gave our team a surprise gift of some of our default products with instructions to open when home. The next day, we asked them to put themselves in our customers' shoes, take a minute to reflect on how our customer feels when they get the same product. This motivates them to keep the company standard by offering quality product. By default, do you think that's a defective product or just a standard product?
I think it's just understanding your own product.
Understanding the product. Yeah. I think is that.
Yeah, I think that's my winner, definitely.
Yeah. Okay. So one more.
Yeah. There's one in here. Have you got the one in here about the brand ambassadors?
I'd
like to give my prize to that one.
Okay, I'm not sure if I've got to that one yet.
If I read it out here, it's Joel. Yeah, we complement a community of brand ambassadors that operate 24/7 with a team in the contact centre in typical opening hours. So nearly half of all contact is responded to by customers for customers.
That's right.
So I'd give my prize to that one because I think there's just so many wins on that front.
Yeah. Fabulous news. Well, we're going to jump across to Mike. We've got a short window left, Mike. So if you'd like to get your presentation up there, and if you'd like to share us your thoughts on the role of technology in becoming world class.
Oh my goodness, so I had to follow 3 great presentations. But I'm going to do my best. Good start, eh?
Yeah.
So my messages really are quite straightforward, I think. But I do feel that technology can be a hindrance to achieving world class. And what I want to touch upon really are, one is great technology, what does it look like, and also know-how, experience and expertise I think are very valuable for customers to be able to, if you like, bring the good things that technology to life. So they're the kind of 2 themes I wanted to quickly touch on. And if we just reflect really on the challenges we face today as customers, as service providers, our rate of change is enormous. And from that perspective, change is hard. And because things are happening around us so quickly, it just puts more pressure really on the operation. Of course, we have a balance of budgets, priorities within the business. We may have and often have, and I think this is the point really for my little session. The notion of this disparate aging infrastructure, I think, is really getting in the way. And from that perspective, then, when you see the customers' expectations evolving and other brands doing great things that make their customers excited, how the hell can I properly even hope to get into that kind of performance while I'm struggling with all this stuff? So from that perspective, I kind of summarize that like this. When we made our investments in public sector technology over time, did make sense at that time. But really what it turned out to be was a collection of what we call point solutions. And they had good roles to play, but actually, in the context of a modern customer experience, it actually becomes very, very hard for me to run an operation with lots and lots of disparate technologies. And about a decade ago, it made sense really to try and sort of bring these together. And there was lots of kind of work done in the industry to integrate and make all these things work logically together, and it would be so terrific. And guess what? Once we kind of built these kind of integrations, I want to make a change in one platform. Well, actually, I can't do that because it's going to impact all the platforms and therefore I'm stuck. So these kind of Joe mentioned spaghetti earlier in the conversation. It just, to me, really is what's a lot of, I feel, kind of in the market today. And I think really is one of these sort of foundation issues which is stopping customers from expressing themselves and actually getting to the point where they can, if you like, adjust technology-wise to be able to perform in a world-class way. So let me just take a drink. The other point to note as well is that when we want to bring in things like social or quality, that's very, very hard when you have a nest of this kind of a situation. And I think as well that becomes, if you like, just dominoes. It creates another problem because you're putting into a silo, you have social in the corner, and everybody else in a sort of more managed contact center, and again that defeats the object of productivity. So really, this is, I think, a major trap here for our customers. And I would just say there's a very healthy, high 40% of the contact centers in operation today across the UK and Ireland working just like this. And I think they really have to revisit their tech. And of course, from Genesis, I kind of want to show you an example of what we believe is a solution to these problems. We've been working hard on this for many years. This particular offering is one of 3, but this one is called Pure Cloud. And the nice thing about this is it's been kind of coded from scratch to cater for all the things I've just shown you as the problems. And therefore, it kind of has on board within itself, logically, the ability for voice chat, email, co-browsing, social, etc. It's kind of just natively part of its fabric, and it can also accommodate new fabric when that matters in time. I don't care how I sort of provide that sort of work, if you like, to my people, whether they're in-house, outsourced, at home. It doesn't matter because it's web-based and cloud-based. It's very easy. But I think the key notion around this type of new technology is the idea that this platform does not stop. Okay, so there is no notion of let's stop and do an upgrade. That just does not happen. We kind of add in new functionality when we have something to bring in that's adding new capability. Otherwise, the platform has a do not stop sort of a design philosophy. I think that becomes very, very important because imagine spaghetti, it becomes so fragile, so delicate. If one thing sort of goes wrong, then lots of things will go wrong with spaghetti. So because this software-based, if you like, application in a true cloud infrastructure, I think it really lends itself to that, to the notion of non-stop. And then talking about things like bringing in new capability. So we kind of code in some new functionality, we kind of bring it into the ecosystem, and then it becomes available for our users to consume when they're ready. They'll get a flag on the screen to say, just so you know, the screen recording is not available. It's more than likely going to be within their sort of subscription tariff. So whether I choose to use it or not is customer's choice. It's a very, very easy way to bring in enhancements. And the recent ones that we brought in were the co-browsing, but also journey mapping. And Martin, your point really about that notion of you can't do omnichannel without that consolidated view. Well, that's absolutely true. And you kind of can't do the omnichannel without the sort of true breadcrumb trail of where did my customer touch my brand. And the nice thing about this application is that I've got so many touch points, I collect that knowledge in my database, and therefore I know where the customer has been. And I would say maybe 90%, if you like, of their activities, I'm able to sort of have really rich data on board to be able to work in parallel with the customer. So a good way to bring omnichannel to life without relying on integrations to CRMs and other things that often become complex. So again, my point is, I think this is a great example of good technology. It's flexible, it's very, very easy to use, and if you like, I think customers can grab it and jump in and sort of make their, if you like, dreams, if you like, come to life and help achieve that world class. And I know as well about Martin's comment about narrow intent. You know, you have to really, understand and live and breathe that, and therefore, in-house, in my operation, I need to have the ability to jump onto this technology and change it. And that's the way we designed it. Go back to the spaghetti. Imagine trying to make changes in the spaghetti. Well, actually, you can't. To make a change in spaghetti, you're going to impact something else. You need a lower level technique. So, again, I just wanted to highlight the fact that this is where I believe some of the congestion happens. The other point I wanted to make then really was about the know-how. And the simple question here is, I need to know that this technology will actually help me achieve my outcome. And this would be if the business outcomes become very, very important within Genesis. And we have designed a kind of a full suite of what we call use cases, predefined use cases, that are really designed to be, if you will, prescriptive ways for our customers to be able to consume functionality easily. And instead of doing gigantic, big sort of one-hit projects, let's do lots of small little projects that are kind of more effective and more practical for me to pick up and run with. And we find they work very, very well. The benefit obviously of those is that it's a very defined scope for us and the customer. It kind of reduces time within the project and obviously cost, and also as well, because we understand what we're delivering within that time scale and the customer, because it's very, very clear, it reduces risk and gets you better success. So in that sense, it doesn't necessarily always mean that because you're changing tech means that you have to go into a sort of a more risk environment. The last thing I wanted to mention really was just about the expertise, and I want a trusted partner to help me be successful, whether that's Genesis Professional Services or one of our trusted partners across the globe. Really what we believe is that a lot of what gets deployed in the industry today, sadly, is not the Rolls-Royce way. This is very much the case where the vendor will deploy, deliver, bring into service, give you a couple of days of hand-holding post-go live, and then if there's something broken, then call me, otherwise I'm kind of out of the picture. Which is really unfortunate, because really what we've learned already in the 3 conversations so far is that, like the Rolls-Royce way, sort of the customer success just never ends, and I can always kind of reach into that, if you like, excellent delivery of service when I need that service, whenever that is, throughout the life of the platform. And also I can sort of drop in new improvements at any time during the life of the platform. So therefore, this kind of notion has been building within Genesis, and it's kind of dovetailing into the customers. So, and my customer that sort of said, look, I want you to take care of all of it for me, please, Mike, or your partner, or actually teach me how to do this, and I can do it myself. Or finally, no, I can actually be self-sufficient. So we've tailored packages, so again, it's easy to consume, it's just kind of simple and fast. And then based upon your expertise in-house, you can either take it on board and run with the materials, or engage us and we will work to deliver it for you. So a bit faster jumping because of the time, but really there were the kind of three sort of points I wanted to make. But I think with the combination of great technology and then that sort of expertise in those use cases, really we can sort of I believe, relieve some of those tensions with the customers and help them, if you like, get further down that road to that world-class.
Indeed, thanks very much for that, Mike. I think there's some very good points in there overall. Particularly, I think some of the key ones are look at your technology pinch points. You can't make changes in all the spaghetti, and at some point you're going to have to lift that old technology out and go for new. Have a look for pre-canned technology cases. I'm starting to see this in a whole series of areas. Speech analytics is one where you can get like the telecom vendors pack that has all of those keywords. So I think pre-cases that you can borrow, learning from other industries is very good. Never be content with your technology. I think there's always room for improvement. Very valid. And just like Rolls-Royce, look not just at the product, but at that complete service wrap around. I think there's the days of selling sort of tin, putting it in and running away are probably well gone. And I think things like cloud very much makes that happen. So let's have a look at a few more top tips and questions. I think we've got one more prize to give out, Mike. So we've got a couple more in from Mike 16, who I think is desperate to win this prize. So Mike says, we did out-of-the-box experiences with members from different departments. We had them go through the instructions for setting up the products to see how well they worked. This gave us a lot of good insight into the needs for change.
I can beat one of these. He's got the last one, which is essentially we want to do cradle-to-grave recording, evaluate to match customer journey mapping, find those pain points we can really know from the customer efforts. He's got to get a prize.
So Mike, does that one win? Okay, well done, Mike 16. So we've got a couple of other comments. Joel said, we complement a community of brand ambassadors that operate 24/7 with the team in the contact center in typical opening hours. Nearly half of all customer contact is responded by customers for customers. And I know you've looked at community there, which is great. Mike says also, I think Joe has made some great points. I love the fact of presenting the deltas versus the averages. Totally agree that the outliers get overlooked when focusing on the average. I'll be looking to institute this practice in my next presentation to management. So I think there's some great beats there. So that's all we've got time for on our 200th webinar. When you leave the webinar, please fill in the survey. If you'd like to have a demonstration of the Genesis Pure Cloud software, please fill in the box when you exit. And just like to say thank you very, very much indeed for our excellent speakers. It's been most enjoyable webinar. Peter Massey, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Joe Hale, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And Martin Hill-Wilson, thank you.
That's right.
And Mike Murphy from Genesis, thank you as well. Okay, we're going to be back again same time next week, just for a 1 hour slot where we're going to be looking at ways to create engaged and empowered agents. So thank you everyone, and look forward to joining you next week. Thank you then. Bye-bye.